Right, so today I have to start by talking about this story. Um, Nurses, and I assume it's other people as well, but these union members are striking, and um, this is from Kian Bex, and he says nurses are striking today because the pandemic isn't taking up all too much time, clearly. Nice to see who's behind this. Communists, Albertans just lost sympathy for you. Now, a lot of people have sympathy for these people. People don't realize that again. This is an issue that's talked about a lot in Alberta, namely in these leftist circles. Though, in that from their perspective, they think that the Kenny government is destroying healthcare in Alberta, and they want to go towards a privatized system. And the reality is that's far from the reality, in that they don't want a privatized system. There is no area that anybody can point to that is a privatized health. They always say, oh, they want to have healthcare like the states. Well, the states is half. They're a halfway privatized area. Um, because I mean the United States government spends like 500-600 billion dollars a year on Medicare. Medicare is government subsidized healthcare. So the idea that the states is a free market is absolute insanity. They're at most a halfway free market. So the reality is that when it comes to the left on many issues, but I mean you take this issue for example, they constantly accuse the other side of what they're guilty of, and that for this example, the reality is that they want a fully socialist system basically, and anything short of that, even if there's a private option, they consider that to be destroying the entire thing, right? For the simple reason that because their view is so fringe, and that Canada is the only OECD country, I believe that's almost 40 countries, that doesn't have a private option, right? So Canada is as far to the left on healthcare that you can possibly think of, that you can possibly give an example for. Almost every other major country in fact, pretty much every major country has a private option, right? So again, we are the radical ones, not any of these other areas. We are the radical ones, and this is the thing that if the way we do things is so well, you shouldn't be worried about a private option. They shouldn't be worried about it, but they are worried about it because the reason that they hate competition so much is that they know that would expose just how poor the system they support is. And the reason they support it is that they're not people that are confident in their own ability. If you work in the public sector and you're afraid of private competition, you're admitting pretty much by default that you're not as good at your job as what you're getting paid, or you're flat out not even worth it at all. Because if you were, you wouldn't be afraid of competition. People who are afraid of competition, um, it's just an admission that they're not very good at what they do, or at the very least, not as good as what they're being paid. That doesn't mean that they all suck. And a lot of these people are just useful idiots. A lot of these people are just useful idiots. They genuinely believe that the Kenny government wants to fully privatize the system, though we got to vote them out, when in reality that's not what they're doing. And the reason why I have no sympathy for these people is because the people that are at the forefront of these movements are manipulating and lying and doing all sorts of underhanded tactics. Now again, they accuse the other side of doing the same, but I don't care, because the other side is not nearly as bad as them, right? And the other side is right. Like, we should absolutely have, at the very least, a privatized option. We should have that. And again, the reason that they think that you shouldn't is because, oh, it's so radical. But it isn't radical, because every other area, or at the very least almost every other area on earth, has that, or at the very least first world countries, right? So the idea that that the states are the radical ones, no, they're actually not actually that radical at all, right? So, and this is the other crazy thing, that, oh, you're gonna have poor people dying in this. Well, no, you're not gonna have poor people dying in the streets, right? Because people that can afford it would go private, and the people that can't will stay public. If anything, it'll help the poor people because there'll be more resources available for them, right? Like, this is the insanity that, and this is the other thing too, that unless it's heavily bureaucratized, which it probably would, which is the only the downside of a privatized healthcare system is the over bureaucratization of the system. Not that it doesn't work, because if there's very little bureaucracy and red tape, the vast majority of people could afford healthcare. Like if you're working, you could afford healthcare, right? Because it would be that cheap. Because I mean, here's the thing: if you're incredibly unhealthy, yeah, you probably wouldn't be able to, but that's your own fault. And this is the exact reason why we should go more towards a privatized system. That if you're poor and you're worried about not being able to afford healthcare, all you got to do is eat healthy, exercise, and not do incredibly unhealthy things. And if you do those things, you don't deserve sympathy. The only people that deserve sympathy are the people that do eat healthy, do exercise, it doesn't mean you have to be the most, healthy as you can possibly be. You can, splurge every now and then, but if you smoke, if you drink all the time, if you eat incredibly unhealthy food all the time, you don't get any sympathy in my book. You get sympathy if you do the right thing, but still get, bad luck. That's when you deserve sympathy, right? So yeah, I mean, this is the thing that, and here's the thing too, like I would at least understand these people and not be so critical of them if they're I mean, I would be critical of them because they're communists, but I wouldn't be as critical of them if they were flat out honest, right? Like if they just were flat out honest and be, hey, we want a fully socialist, going towards a communist system. Anything short of that, we're not going to go for. Like if they were actually honest with that, at least I could understand where they're coming from. But the fact that they're not honest with that just gives me no sympathy for them. So anyway, the next story here is from Candice Malcolm saying, remember when CBC, Globe and Mail, and CTV all did news stories shaming and condemning Andrew Scheer for not wearing a mask at an airport? Look forward to their coverage of our Liberal health minister doing the same. Now, again, the hypocrisy here, it really knows no bounds in that, number one, it's not even the same thing either. Like, if you're the health minister, you'd think you'd be a little more worried about wearing a mask than a member of parliament, right? Like, I mean, not that the standard should be much different, but you're the health minister, right? Like, you think that would be at the forefront of what you say. But again, number one, Patty Haydu isn't a doctor. I don't even think she has any medical background whatsoever. So again, her knowledge on that is rather limiting. And number two, like the rules are just for the peasants, right? Like the rules are just for the peasants. I mean, anybody I think with half a brain at this point, how does anybody still support the concept of mask wearing? Like, back in March and April, we were all told, don't wear a mask. Masks don't work. But then now it's, oh, masks work. You definitely have to wear a mask. Like, which one is it? And this is the thing, too. Like, when it comes to the whole mask thing, I would at least understand where people are coming from if they were flat out honest and said, yeah, we're taking advice from people who were lying to us at the start of this whole thing. But that doesn't make them look very good, right? Because we're taking our medical advice from people that were lying to us at the start of this whole situation, right? Like that doesn't sound very good. But the reality is that either the quote unquote experts, the Tams and the Faucis of the world, either they were so ignorant that they didn't even know anything, they didn't know what they're talking about, which I don't think that's the case, but that is possible technically, or they were lying to us, right? Or there never was any evidence to wear masks, and they were lying to us the entire time, at the start and right now, which is what I think it is. I think that they were somewhat honest off the start. The reality is that if you want to wear a mask, fine. Like if you want to wear a mask, fine. But this is what Fauci said, that you shouldn't be wearing a mask, and I think his main reasoning behind it is that it gives people a false sense of security, in that it may help a little bit, but it's not going to help nearly as much as what people said. So that is the problem when it comes to mask wearing. But again, the other big thing here is the hypocrisy. That the mainstream media was all over Andrew Scheer. Andrew Scheer is the worst guy in the world when he did it. But Patty Haydu does it and nobody cares, right? Because again, it's just the pure bias. It's the bias. This is the mainstream media. And here's the thing. The mainstream media has even less credibility than these doctors, right? Like the mainstream media, they've been lying and manipulating us the entire time. So again, the point being here is that anybody who still trusts the mainstream media, like again, what's it going to take? Like, what's it going to take for you to not trust them? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know even know if it's possible. So anyway, the next thing to bring up here is from Alberta Wild Rose here, saying gaslighting by journalists has become so commonly in 2020. I agree with Manny Ottawa that CBC News is likely just making up numbers for their boss. And again, you have conflicting articles here. One out of Reuters saying Canada sheds jobs for seventh straight month in September, and then I think that's out of CBC, but saying Canada added 378,000 jobs in September, even more than in August. So again, who's right here? Like, who's right? I don't know. I don't know who to say. But I mean, here's the thing. Like, when it comes to trying to determine who's right, I usually err on the side of caution, right? Like, you usually want to err on the side of caution in that I don't know who to believe. Like, I don't know who to believe. And I don't think we're adding that many jobs. And I mean, here's the thing. Given that there's clearly conflicting evidence here, I wouldn't trust either one. Like, to be honest, I wouldn't trust either one because there's no way that you can that conflicting art. And again, none of these are from like crazy wacko news outlets, right? Like, these are both mainstream outlets, right here. So you can't really make that argument. So again, like who do you trust? Like, who do you? And I don't trust CBC as far as I can throw them. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about Reuters, but I know they're pretty mainstream. But again, I don't trust CBC as far as I can throw them, so I would lean towards trusting Reuters, but I don't trust Reuters that much either. So again, I don't know who to trust. I think the reality is that um, if the economy was doing really good, they probably wouldn't have to be constantly reminding us about it, right? Like, if the economy, I mean, here's the thing, a lot of times with the news, it's they don't lie as much as what one may think. A lot of times it's just lies by omission, right? Like, they just don't tell you, they just don't tell you the bad news, right? Like, I mean, this is like with this example right here, they it's a lie by omission that they're just not covering this, right? So that's, I think, what's going on here. A lot of times it's just lies by omission. So anyway, the last thing I wanted to bring up here is from Al Jazeera saying Ireland, Wales to re-enter lockdown as cases surge in Europe. And again, this is exactly what I've been talking about. That the lockdown zealots, they're never going to admit they're wrong. Like, they're never going to admit they're wrong. And again, this is the thing too. The people say, "Oh, there's arguments on both sides." Blah 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 blah. The problem is that you ask these people, what's it going to take to admit you're wrong? Like, what's it going to take to admit the mask mandates don't work? What's it going to take to admit the lockdowns were completely pointless, or at the very least largely pointless? Like what's it going to take? And you ask these people and you can never get a straight answer out of them. You can never get a straight answer out of them. Why is that? Because they don't want to admit they're wrong. This is one of the biggest problems with human beings in general, but especially nowadays, is that we have every incentive in the world to just continue to double down and double down and double down. And I talk to these mask zealots, right? Like, I talk to these people, online mainly, but their argument is always, oh, well, how do you explain the cases going up in all these areas that have mask mandates, and how do you explain the fact that there's an incredibly low number of examples that you can point to that where you can have places that implemented mask mandates and they actually lowered the cases. How do you explain the lack of, if any, studies that show masks actually having a significant impact? Like, and their answer always comes back as just doubling down, right? Like, if we didn't have mask mandates, then we would have had more cases, right? Like, it's just continued to double down and double down and double down. And this is why I so vehemently disagree with these people. Not that I think they're 100% wrong, but I know that if they implement a policy under the guise of it's going to lower the cases, and it doesn't lower the cases, they're just going to double down. It's going to be, yep, masks need to, you just need to wear them, entering and exiting businesses. Then it's going to be at all times when you're indoors. And then it's going to be 24/7 when you're out in public. And then it's going to be, if we see you without a mask, we're going to, like, again, they're just going to keep doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. They will never admit they're wrong, so you might as well you might as well speak up and just disagree with them now rather than waiting so long. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. If you haven't already, make sure you follow me on Twitter, especially also BitChute and Parler. If you'd like to support my work, again, I got some links in the description there as well. So like I say, make sure you check out those links in the description and stay tuned for more.